What do you make of Keir Starmer's attacks on freedom of speech?
It's exactly what you'd expect from someone who holds his position. It's nothing new. I think in the UK, things have gone farther in the UK on the, what would you say, with regards to threats to freedom of expression than maybe anywhere in the West, although Canada's doing its best to play catch-up, maybe New Zealand. It's in keeping with his ethos. It's not surprising and it's appalling.
Keir Starmer thought he was walking into a polite debate. Then Jordan Peterson showed up with a flamethrower made of logic, caffeine, and a thesaurus. Within minutes, Starmer looked like a malfunctioning Siri trying to define socialism. This wasn't a political discussion. It was a TED Talk meets WWE. And guess who brought the steel chair? If you've ever wondered what it looks like when a philosopher absolutely wrecks a politician's entire worldview, oh boy, you're in for a treat. Somewhere in the foggy bureaucratic chaos known as Downing Street, a man named Keir Starmer is valiantly trying to lead a country with the charisma of a fax machine and the conviction of a lukewarm teabag. Enter Jordan Peterson, not in person but as a philosophical thunderstorm, a walking library with teeth, dissecting every flimsy plank of Starmer's so-called leadership, like it's a case study in self-sabotage.
Does it surprise you that Keir Starmer doesn't want a national inquiry into grooming gangs?
No, that doesn't surprise me. It's exactly what you'd expect. I've got an article coming out in the Telegraph this week about exactly that issue, and so it's appalling. Well, there's hard questions that need to be asked about and answered about multiculturalism, and no one's willing to have the discussion. But it needs to be had, obviously. And I think there's maybe a way forward with regards to the signatories of the Abraham Accord, to have a serious discussion about how Islamic fundamentalism might be brought under control and some vision of how...
Now imagine Britain as a ship drifting aimlessly through stormy seas. The crew is panicking, the compass is spinning, and at the helm stands Captain Starmer, squinting at a manual labelled Generic Leadership for Dummies, trying to figure out which way is forward without offending anyone. Meanwhile, Peterson, from the shores of reason and structure, is yelling across the ocean, asking if anyone in the boat has even read a map.
Say about the state of morality in Britain that grooming gangs were taking place for more than 3 decades.
Now, that's what happens when a naive, demented, and self-righteous multiculturalism takes the upper hand, and when the upper class is willing to sacrifice the poor to their own moral presumptions. Yeah, it's appalling in every possible way. So, and it indicates, it's indicative of something truly hideous beneath the surface, not only on the rape gang side, but obviously on the side of the authorities that conspired to keep it a secret. Dreadful.
Starmer's identity crisis isn't a phase, it's a lifestyle. One day, he's the people's progressive knight in shining armour, and the next, he's polishing his centrist credentials like a vintage briefcase. He changes positions so frequently, you'd think he was doing interpretive dance instead of running a government. And no, this isn't adaptability, it's ideological whiplash.
What's your prediction for the UK election? You've been quite scathing about Sir Keir Starmer, but the polls show at the moment, certainly, if the election happens in the autumn, it seems likely, that he is heading to some kind of victory. What do you think that would mean for Britain? And do the Conservatives have any chance of stopping that?
I think it'll be catastrophic. I believe that Labour, like the socialist parties in Canada, is absolutely overwhelmed by the diversity, equity, and inclusivity, victimizer narrative types.
Peterson, a man who breaks down human behaviour into 12 rules and expects accountability from goldfish, would look at Starmer's political gymnastics and declare him a masterclass in existential avoidance. If clarity were a currency, Starmer would be bankrupt. His policies are like Schrodinger's cat, simultaneously existing and not existing, depending on the audience. On the economy, Starmer presents a budget that looks less like a vision and more like a corporate spreadsheet given sentience. Growth is promised, but there's no engine under the hood. Just vibes, wishful thinking, and tax adjustments that squeeze the middle class while gently patting billionaires on the back. It's the political equivalent of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic while assuring everyone it's just a bit of ice. Meanwhile, Peterson's philosophies on competence and structured ambition highlight Starmer's obsession with surface-level stability. The man governs like he's managing a dental clinic, not a nation. There's procedure, sterilization, and absolutely zero room for passion or principle. The economy under Starmer is less a bold new era and more a museum of broken calculators and recycled buzzwords.
That even if Starmer himself has any sense, which I doubt, the probability that his minions will lay waste to the UK it's certain in my estimation. There's so much behind the scene tyrannizing going on in the name of hypothetical utopian progress that it's almost unimaginable. I mean, the CCTVs in the ULEZ zones are a great example of that, and everything that's happened in London under Sadiq Khan, who's like poster boy for ideologically addled globalist utopians. And if the Labour gets in, and I can understand why the citizens of the UK are hungry for a change, if Labour gets in, it's like Venezuela, here we come.
When it comes to culture, Starmer is so terrified of offending anyone that he's turned Labour into the political equivalent of gluten-free tofu, bland, textureless, and unable to take a position without issuing an apology. He avoids cultural issues like they're radioactive, which in politics they are. But the solution isn't to pretend they don't exist, unless your strategy is to win elections by boring the electorate into unconsciousness. Peterson champions clarity, conviction, and moral scaffolding. Starmer, on the other hand, seems to believe that if he just says nothing loudly enough, maybe no one will notice that his party's moral compass has been left in a pub somewhere near Camden. You can almost hear him whisper, "If I just avoid eye contact with reality, maybe it won't ask me any hard questions." And then there's the authoritarian flair. Starmer, once touted as the saviour of party democracy, now runs Labour like it's a private club for risk-averse technocrats. MPs are selected with all the grassroots input of a North Korean election, and any whiff of ideological deviation is met with swift administrative exile. The left flank of the party has been airbrushed out of existence like a Soviet-era family photo.
And Starmer's posturing with regards to adolescence is only going to make that worse. It's bad psychology, and it's not only that, it's also oriented not to help young people, but to make Mr. Starmer feel a hell of a lot more secure in the idiot presumptions of his dimwit progressivism. So, and that's really the fundamental aim. It's like, how can we show we're right? And if we have to burn some young people on the pyre to make sure that our moral presuppositions can remain intact and our faith in our idiocy remains unchallenged, then we might as well teach kids using a Netflix series on adolescence.
Compare that to Peterson's reverence for institutional integrity and decentralized power. Starmer isn't leading a movement, he's administering a brand, a beige, lifeless corporate brand, with a loyalty card system and mandatory PowerPoint presentations. Leadership for him isn't about vision, it's about control. The Labour Party under Starmer doesn't inspire, it audits. On foreign policy, Starmer doesn't lead, he follows. International summits become his cosplay events, where he pretends to be a global statesman while parroting positions handed to him by whichever Western power sent him the latest briefing memo. His stance on global issues is less about values and more about optics. Diplomacy by press release, strategy by hashtag. Britain under Starmer isn't being led. It's being managed by a middle manager with delusions of adequacy. Peterson, who believes in the individual's capacity to shoulder responsibility and act with purpose, would likely classify Starmer as a case study in what happens when ambition lacks philosophy. A leader without a spine, chasing public approval like a golden retriever after a tennis ball. Even on issues where clarity should be simple, housing, education, climate, Starmer finds a way to overcomplicate the obvious. Housing policies are buried under layers of planning reform. Waffle education initiatives get lost in a sea of metrics, and climate action is carefully worded not to offend oil donors or suburban car owners. It's policy making by risk assessment.
The actual desire to tar anyone who has, as I say, not got a voice and is wanting to make their voice heard as a violent far-right neo-Nazi seems to me to be a big error by Keir Starmer and others. Because, if you can't say, we recognize your deep concerns about some things that have happened, including mass stabbings, terrorism, and much more. We understand your deep concerns, and we are going to try to get onto this and on top of this. But there is no excuse to turn out on the streets and be violent against your Muslim brothers and sisters and neighbors or anyone else.
The man has turned governance into a flavourless porridge of non-committal strategy. There's no bite, no soul, just bullet points masquerading as beliefs. Britain doesn't need a manager-in-chief. It needs a leader with a backbone, a plan, and preferably a pulse. Peterson didn't just intellectually shred Starmer. He tore apart the illusion that there was ever anything solid underneath the neatly pressed suit and rehearsed pauses. The real tragedy. This is all happening while Britain faces crises on every front. A health service gasping for air, a housing market impersonating a game of Monopoly on steroids, and a generation of young people whose only real inheritance is anxiety. And through it all, Starmer delivers statements with the energy of a dial tone and the impact of a damp sponge. Peterson wouldn't even need to raise his voice. Starmer defeats himself by being the political version of a ghost-written self-help book, full of generalities, scared of specifics, and destined to gather dust. Britain deserves more than a political placebo. It needs leadership that can inspire action, not just manage decline. What Jordan Peterson intellectually deconstructs, Britain lives through. The collapse of leadership into focus group-tested slogans. The evaporation of belief into administrative tidiness. Starmer is what happens when a nation in crisis hires a risk consultant instead of a prime minister.
Somehow navigate us to a better place. Possibly, is he going to be a transformative prime minister where we all wake up in 2-3 years and think, wow, the Starmer revolution? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's better. That's better than it might have been. Well, I spent quite a long time working with Democrats in the US, and I got very disillusioned about that, partly because they showed zero propensity to draw a line between the moderate Democrats and the radicals.
And just like that, the Peterson-shaped intellectual meteor finally crashed through the roof of number 10, splattering the wallpaper with cold, hard, philosophical reality. No yelling, no frothing at the mouth, just calmly dissecting Starmer's leadership like a science fair frog. Except in this case, the frog already has a law degree, a massive office, and absolutely zero discernible vertebrae. Jordan Peterson didn't need to raise his voice. All he had to do was hold up a mirror. Let's start with the basics. Peterson's whole worldview is built on the radical idea that maybe, just maybe, leaders should take responsibility for their actions. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer approaches responsibility like it's radioactive. If anything goes wrong, strikes, NHS backlogs, economic flatulence, he vanishes behind a cloud of inquiries and reviews and learning lessons, like a magician running from his own rabbit. Peterson's ideology is fix your damn life before you try running a country. Starmer's approach? Pretend the country is a group project and hope someone else gets blamed when the PowerPoint crashes. Then there's vision. That thing leaders are supposed to have? A sense of purpose, direction, a bold blueprint for the future? Starmer manages to lead a major political party and govern the UK with all the visionary energy of a printer setup manual.
I suspect what will happen in the UK is the same thing that happened in Canada, which is that the right will split, reform, and reunite, and that would be the best bet. You know, maybe as a coalition government, I'm not staking my, what would you say? I'm not, no, not on either candidate. I've spoken with Nigel Farage and with Kemi Badenoch, and they're both credible people, and they have to fight it out amongst themselves. But I imagine the right will unite eventually again and hopefully reform.
While Peterson stresses structure, order and moral clarity, Starmer seems to believe that vague optimism and management buzzwords are a valid substitute for a political philosophy. One man talks about dragons to explain existential chaos. The other dodges questions about rail strikes like they're actually dragons. Peterson, love him or loathe him, doesn't just analyse ideas, he connects them. His framework is all about coherence. Clean your room, clean your country, get your house in order before lecturing the world. Now let's examine Starmer's house. It's not just messy, it's condemned. Half the policies are boarded up. The roof leaks contradictions. And there's a suspicious smell of focus group leftovers coming from the kitchen. If Peterson's ideological foundation is a carefully built cathedral of order, Starmer's is a B&Q flat-pack cabinet assembled with fear and duct tape. Starmer isn't just a bad leader, he's the anti-leader. He's what you get when you put a spreadsheet through finishing school and teach it how to frown at press conferences. Where's the fire? Where's the conviction? Where's the "here's who I am, take it or leave it"? He speaks in press releases. He campaigns in ambiguities. He governs like he's worried someone might give him a bad Trustpilot review. Peterson would call it moral cowardice, an inability to stake your claim in the cultural and political battlefield because you're too scared of offending the BBC, the donors, or worse.
The radical leftist proclivity to describe everything as an oppressive patriarchy and to make men weak is doing anything other than hurting young people right to the core. And Starmer's posturing with regards to adolescence is only going to make that worse. It's bad psychology, and it's not only that, it's also oriented not to help young people, but to make Mr. Starmer feel a hell of a lot more secure in the idiot presumptions of his dimwit progressive.
Twitter, this isn't leadership. It's risk management in a haunted house. Starmer governs like he's running a corporate HR seminar about policies he doesn't believe in, hoping no one notices that the free biscuits are stale and the PowerPoint slides are 6 months out of date. Every time there's a moment that cries out for boldness, a principled stand, a decisive call, even a bit of spine, Starmer responds with a softly mumbled press statement that's been legally vetted into linguistic gruel. Peterson, by contrast, would argue that clarity is the antidote to chaos, structure, accountability, a belief system that doesn't wilt when someone raises their eyebrows. Starmer, his belief system changes faster than his tie collection. He's built an entire leadership persona around not being anyone in particular. No edges, no convictions, just a carefully neutral, softly disappointing presence, designed to be inoffensive to all and inspiring to absolutely no one. It's not just dull, it's dystopian beige. And this leads us to the grand finale, the spreadsheet, with hair that thinks it's the Prime Minister. Britain is now being run by a man who treats leadership like it's a legal memo. Triple-checked, over-edited, covered in footnotes, and as fun to read as a sock catalogue. His speeches have the cadence of someone reading cereal box ingredients aloud, hoping the public mistakes it for economic strategy. He's the first Prime Minister in history who could be replaced by a Microsoft Excel macro without anyone noticing for a week.
Fears I had about Keir Starmer have come true. He's a totalitarian, utopian, narcissistic leftist, and that's been on full display in the last month. And so it's a hell of a thing to see, and this is absolutely no fun for anyone.
Under Starmer, Theo Downing Street har gått från ett centrum för ledarskap till ett politiskt väntningsrum. Not for ideas. Oh no, those aren't allowed without focus group clearance. But for policies that are always under review. plans that are always in development, and decisions that are always pending consultation. It's a purgatory of leadership where nothing happens, no one decides, and the only real policy is don't rock the boat. The man is allergic to waves. He governs like a lifeguard in a kiddie pool. So when Jordan Peterson's philosophical freight train rolls through this circus, it doesn't just demolish Starmer's policies, it shatters the illusion that Starmer was ever really a leader to begin with. What Peterson destroys isn't just political positioning, it's the hollow shell, the performative competence, the deeply unserious seriousness of a man who accidentally wandered into power and decided to just manage his way through history. The great irony? Peterson's ethos is built on the belief that people must face chaos head-on. Confront the dragon, speak truth, own your damn role. And in the end, that's the ultimate indictment. Keir Starmer didn't slay the dragon. He scheduled a meeting about it, filed a risk assessment, and then blamed the dragon's presence on the previous government. Britain deserves better than this. It deserves passion, clarity, courage, hell, even a functioning sense of direction. Instead, it was a human procedural manual with a confused moral compass and a talent for disappointing everyone equally. If leadership were a Netflix category, Starmer would be filed under slow burn disappointment. And Jordan Peterson, with nothing more than the sheer weight of coherent thought, just proved it. So here we are, a philosopher dismantling a prime minister's entire worldview without ever stepping into the same room. Peterson didn't destroy Starmer with a debate. He didn't need to. The sheer contrast between principled thinking and Starmer's performative neutrality did the job. And as the UK quietly slips into another round of national identity confusion, one thing's clear. Keir Starmer might wear the title of Prime Minister, but Jordan Peterson just showed the world who actually understands what leadership looks like.